let's start out. If you're not on, if you could mute. Otherwise, we start getting some feedback. And I'll open up to questions in a little bit, especially for Sergeant Rutger. If you could do a Zoom chat or just raise your hand and let me know that you have a question, and we'll get started. The agenda is going to be Sergeant Rutger's got another call, and he's a busy guy, popular, and I've heard him talk. He's going to be valuable to just sort of let us know what's going on. The agenda includes, again, Sergeant Rutger, Holiday Light Contest. I sort of want to update you on what we're doing in the neighborhood, and I think it could be fun. A quick note on the referendum and finances, and if anybody has questions, homeless update, and then really it's a relatively brief one, but I wanted to open up to what you might have questions on. My goal is to have this every 2 to 3 months as a way to stay in touch. My hope is that I prefer everything live, I think, like most of us, but as I'm trying to learn to be accessible and communicate, this is sort of the way we're going. So welcome to our community meeting, and great to have you here. Hope you're getting ready for Thanksgiving. So let me introduce Sergeant Rutger. He is West End Precinct. He is our community liaison who is, I've heard him talk, he's passionate, he's a great guy. And so I asked Sergeant Rutger to talk about any safety issue that he saw. I know people had talked about break-ins and stuff like that, but just sort of reiterate going into the holidays what we need to be aware of. So Sergeant Rutger, good to have you. You could go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And as always, certainly thank you for having me. Like you, man, I love to do this live, but where we are, this is the safest and best way to still be effective and at the same time stay in touch with our neighbors. And just want to get right into it, man. Going into the holidays, this is like the beginning of what we see as far as scams. Scams pretty much just jump off the page starting like the week maybe before Thanksgiving throughout the rest of the year. So I want to certainly our neighbors in our community to be aware of just scams. Obviously, robocalls have been just a big thing this year as well. So don't be surprised if you start to receive more calls from different charities asking you to volunteer or donate money or items to their charity. So I strongly encourage all of us, if you have any questions about a charity that you're not really sure of, you can always go to the Better Business Bureau. That's where I kind of log in and check different organizations, charities to see if they're legitimate or not. So the Better Business Bureau is like a one-stop shop for getting that information when you're trying to kind of vet out which charities are good, which ones are not good. Obviously, holiday shopping is upon us. So, we really like to just reiterate that when you go out, try to do your shopping during the daytime. If you find yourselves going out later in the afternoon, make sure you obviously, you're parking in well-lit areas. Most companies and stores will have employees, if not security on staff. You can request those individuals to escort you to your car. So don't take a chance in walking to your car in a dark parking lot, especially holding goods. Certainly keep your remote control in your hand. Keep your hand on your panic button just in case you need to push it and kind of draw attention to yourself if you find yourself in any trouble. Another issue that we see during this time are porch pirates. We strongly encourage our citizens to, if you are ordering something, number one, see if a neighbor can be available to pick that package up. If a neighbor is not available, always request a signature before FedEx or Amazon, leaves the package, because Porch Pirates, people who just basically shadow these delivery trucks, will absolutely just come on your porch and just take whatever they leave behind. So please, please, please try to be mindful when your packages arrive. Going back into the shopping malls, carry as less cash as possible. We strongly don't recommend you carry purses. Carry only the cash you need in your front pocket. Carry the debit or the credit card you need in your front pocket. Just because, I mean, you're just an easy target for someone just to run up to you and snatch your purse or take your, like I said, your belongings, and then you have to go down the long list of trying to get those things recovered. Um, in your district, Mr. Druffel, do you have, I guess, as far as shopping plazas or locations that you would like to see just more patrol over the holidays?
Really, we only have we have two shopping areas. The 70-100 split is one, and then over by Lowe's. And I think as I have you on here, maybe even address the homeless situation for a minute there. From your standpoint, there's several aspects to that, but I think, that, and also, I'm always amazed when you talk about how people that leave their cars unlocked and how much is taken out of cars. I want to say it was like 70%. Is that right, Sergeant? Where the ones that get taken, the 70% are unlocked.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, already this year, I believe we're over 700 weapons stolen out of cars. 700 guns that have been, taken easily. Most of the vehicles, week by week, are easy targets because the keys are left inside of those vehicles. So, I mean, the number is steady climbing that our media relations, Mr. Don Aaron and Christine Mufford, puts out every week. I can certainly email you the last publication that they put out, but you're absolutely right. We strongly encourage that. Please park smart. Please keep your keys, with you. Don't leave them in your vehicle, as well as your weapons.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm amazed. I'm sometimes miss that, but it's a high proportion of what happens with cars and weapons being stolen. And we still keep doing it. That's crazy. Maybe before, and I know I got you another 15, 20 minutes. Can you there's a lot of questions on the homeless situation, and I know there's some limitations, but any thoughts on that side?
No, I mean, the honest answer is no. We work, obviously, Miss Judith Tackett, and, we pretty much work and assist her. I do know obviously the water company is making, its way with their project. They just started building the water treatment plant over there. What we're seeing right now is a handful of those individuals that have lived there for years have, got up and started to kind of branch out. And we unfortunately are seeing, some of those people move in like some just thick brush areas that pretty much run parallel with the Harpeth River. So that's what we're seeing right now. There's still no long-term housing or places where we can just take these individuals and give them. So I check with Ms. Tackett at least once a week to see if there's anything that we can do. Obviously, they're still there, right there behind the Lowe's, right there at Walmart. So we're still working with her, like I said, weekly to see, what any resources that we can give as far as transportation. We've offered to just be there to help get them from point A to point B. I can tell you, while I'm thinking of it, there was a gentleman that owned a patch of land behind the Lowe's that is about to pretty much clear out his portion of his property. So that will help. Properties that we see that still have a lot of, thick brush vegetation, we reach out to them, we're mailing them, we're meeting with them to encourage them to cut it down as much as possible. Because when you do that, obviously it just limits, where they can kind of set up camp.
Yeah, I talk to Judy pretty much weekly too, and I'll sort of update you on. But do any of you have questions for Sergeant Rucker? I want to make sure we get your questions answered.
Love questions.
So you can unmute or raise your hand, or if I'm a host here, so I just let me know if you can unmute. But does anybody have a question for Sergeant Rucker? I'm just checking to make sure there's nothing I'm doing on my end to prevent you from the question. Okay. I don't see any questions, but feel free to jump in. And so just to give you background on this area, and you may know more than Sergeant than I know, but the homeless encampment has been there for 10 plus years, as I understand, and has sort of grown exponentially. And as I talked to Judy, unfortunately, it wasn't addressed early enough, and so people get pretty entrenched in that situation. So the real answer is, there isn't a quick solution for this. The answer that is universally set is that they require housing, and the reason the homeless require housing is in order to get them. There's a lot of mental illness and addictions. In order to get them out of that situation, and some are just in tough times, it requires to get them in some kind of housing. Once they're in a housing situation, what occurs is that there's a lot of third-party nonprofits that can help, and they're already helping by being there in many times. So what happens is once you can get them into housing, there's a great chance for them to come out of homelessness, and that's really the target for us is doing that. Now, that doesn't happen overnight. There's Ms. Tackett talked about, they just identified a hotel, not in our district, but that will accommodate probably 80 to 100 homeless. So we started talking, I asked Ms. Tackett for a short-term and a long-term plan, because really the only way we're going to get the property back is to really identify that housing solution. And we can't enforce the area until we do that. Sergeant, you probably know more than I do, but if we can identify a place where we could allow them to get developed or rehab, then we can start cleaning up the area, and I think that's our target. So with, we just talked last Friday, sort of work on plans in front of the budget. So tell us what you need, because if you look at places in California and other places, I was out there in San Diego a couple of years ago, and it's just embarrassing. We got to make sure that we just can't ignore it, and to say that you can't, develop the finances against the solution, it means there's no solution. So the reality is, if we're going to solve this, I don't know how much it's going to cost, but we're going to have to do it with the money and identify the right way to get it done. So I know it's frustrating. I drove by there the last couple days to go to Lowe's. as I do more and more projects. And, you know, it's getting more dense. I will say that as they've tried, as some of the homeless have tried and were displaced from the water project, they sort of gravitated toward Davidson and that area. And I think whether you, Sergeant, or I know I talked to Ms. Tackett, who has some people that can sort of talk to them. We've been able to sort of get them back into the Lowe's area. And I know that doesn't sound like it's a win, but it keeps them away from the residential neighborhoods like ours and keeps them in the commercial area. And that just allows a little bit more control and a safety, people feeling a little safe that they're not coming closer to our houses. So that is the target. That's what we're trying to do. You know, when I first started learning about it, I was, you know, I think as frustrated as some of you have been, but then as you start to learn of the problem, you recognize it's not that simple. So anyhow, we're working on it. I think we got to be serious and intentional about it. We can't just ignore it. And you can see what happens when it's ignored. It doesn't go away. My hope long term is to get that neighborhood back. That park is in that area is owned by the city, the state, Lowe's, and numerous groups. It's actually not our district. It's David Rosenberg's district. So it gets sort of complicated when you're trying to manage 3 different ownership groups and have them all recognize a solution. So anyhow, that's sort of background to it. I'll take any questions, or Sergeant Ruckers, if we have any questions relative to homeless. Okay. Any questions at all? I will say that years ago, I got to know Carl Reisner, who was in charge of the homeless mission downtown on 8th Street. And we and I used to go to breakfast. We were in Qantas together, and I got to know him and some of the solutions. And I got to say, they had some great ideas. And I met 2 or 3 people that did come off of being homeless and have great lives. They felt pretty, not intimidated, but they felt like without that long-term plan for them, they would have not done it. All 3 were addicted. In cases, one just pain medication, and kept getting worse and worse, and became, you know, started breaking in houses. And he said, I would have never even dreamt that I could do this. He eventually worked for the mission as a volunteer coordinator, but we gotta, we can't just push them to the side, and we got to really find a way to take care of them. So anyhow, that's what's going on. You can email me at any time if you have specific questions. The last thing I would say, and I think Sergeant Rutger would agree, is if you see something, criminal behavior, anything that's dangerous, to let West Precinct Police know. And the reason for that is they react and anticipate areas where they get the most calls. Is that right, Sergeant Rutger?
That's absolutely right. And, you know, that is pretty much as far as the police and our participation in this. It's our only real action or contribution, unfortunately, that we're a part of. If someone is doing something illegal in our presence, we can make an arrest. If it's not in our presence, if the person that witnessed it would like to make a report, we can make that report. That report goes to the district attorney's office, and they make the determination if a warrant will be issued for, you know, whatever offense was committed. So, you know, when we go out there, obviously we see it. We have just tons and tons of issues that, you know, affect us in other areas like theft, shoplifting, assaults, aggravated assaults, drug overdose. So that area contributes to a lot of things on our crime maps just weekly. So the only thing we can do again is make an arrest, keep in mind the mental illness side of it that you mentioned, sir. The other issues, addictions that you mentioned. If we arrest them, we take them obviously to jail. They don't have anything, so they just come right back. So we're just right back to square one. So trying to find permanent housing, trying to find other resources that can help them just get better is the idea. So thank you so much for working with Miss Tackett. And thank you for just continuing just to, like I said, be a voice for us.
I'm going to address questions, and I know you got about 10 more minutes, Sergeant. And you may answer this. I have a guess, but the question is, how many do you expect to become functional, the homeless, and what would they do with the mentally ill? So would you have anything? I have a couple of thoughts on how many become functional in terms of what percent are mentally ill. I don't know if you have a better stat, Sergeant.
Yeah, that's all Miss Judy Tackett, man. Like I said, we work with her and a couple other organizations that go down there to kind of, talk to them. So I apologize. I wouldn't have those numbers.
Yeah, I'm going to make a guess, and only because I've seen some of the stats, but I'm going to say about 30% are mentally ill is what I recall. It may not be accurate, but I will try to get that better. And so, yeah, when you have someone mentally ill, and some of the people in the center of this encampment are the most mentally ill. So it becomes even more difficult to work with them. And the mentally ill and this is per Ms. Tackett, is they don't want to leave. This is as much as it's out of bounds in some fashion. They perceive it as their home. They like where they're at. So, again, to Ms. Tackett, she said, this is like us moving to Westmead or their neighborhood. It's where we like. They're comfortable. They obviously have an ability to solicit. But having said that, again, if we find solutions, according to her, she thinks that if we had housing solutions, 80% of them, we could get at least 80% out into those solutions. And of course, then you have to work on the mentally ill component.
Correct.
So if we could get a solution, we get a place for them to live. We get the ability to then manage this at a much higher level.
Yes, sir.
And one of the questions is, who monitors their health and safety? And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's several nonprofits that are there on a regular basis. We really don't have, as a city, the ability to do that.
Correct. There are several nonprofits that some come from out of state to drop off just medicine, food, clothing. So, it's unless you're there, it's hard to keep track of exactly just how many nonprofits actually are down there. So when we're down there, we see it, or we have, there's a couple employees that Jim and Nick's will tell us, well, this nonprofit came today, they came yesterday. We reach out to them, and we ask them very, very politely to push those resources to Ms. Tackett, so that, Ms. Tackett can have those, their information to, work together to try to find this permanent solution. These nonprofits, they don't really talk to one another. So, a lot of times they're just kind of walking over each other. And I truly feel that if all of them work together, we could, find, a better way just to help them out. But there's just several nonprofits, sir, that go down there to give them goods.
Next question. When mental illness appears to play a role in the behavior that leads to arrest, do you take them? Is there a special facility, Sergeant, that you can take them to? Or is it just they go back on?
So we call mobile crisis. Mobile crisis, obviously, it's a free service to those, to the uninsured. So mobile crisis will come out and they will talk to them and give them the option of going to a facility to be treated. More than likely, it's going to be Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. That's the main facility where they would go.
Thanks. Yeah, I know. And those are maxed out a lot of times.
Yes, sir.
Next
Yes, sir.
question, my last question here is, we don't want them to obviously come to our neighborhoods. Is there a way to cut back some of the vegetation in some of the areas? And I think that's a good question. I've noticed several areas that I want to get with Public Works during the winter to maybe cut back some in some areas, especially it's leading into our neighborhood, where I think it's really important to
absolutely,
from a safety perspective, be more aware.
Absolutely. I mean, your citizens going towards Bellevue, they want and they should have answers. And respectfully, it's a harsh thing to do, to cut down trees and vegetation. But if they don't have a place to set up, then there's a good chance they're not going to come there. So that's what I really, as a community coordinator, try to do, is reach out to businesses that own property to do their best to trim it down so that, it's not a place they want to come and set up their tents.
Right. One other piece was sort of a follow-up to that question. Is there a way to identify the homeless? And I know so that we could track them. And I know actually Ms. Tackett is actually working on something like that, but it's a very difficult system because they're not so easy to track in terms of individual names, and they're many are skeptical of any authority. So therefore, getting a correct name out of anybody may not always work. It's that's one of their biggest issues in many cases, is their not necessarily respect for authority, but their lack of trust.
Yes, sir.
So I know they're working on that, and so hopefully we'll be able to do that. It's not like throwing money against this, but I do think we can complain and have problems for years to come. But unless we invest in a solution, we're just going to see the same old thing. It's just like our police that we respect so much. We have to invest in the right things to keep ourselves safe. And Sergeant Rucker, I want to thank you and the team over there for everything you guys do. I feel like we can call you and you're there, and you're always willing to help us in any way. So please have a great Thanksgiving, and thanks so much for coming on.
Yes, sir.
You take care of yourself, okay?
Yes, sir. Have a happy Thanksgiving. You take care, buddy.
Thanks, Sergeant. Okay. Next, hopefully I answered all your questions. If you have any specific questions along the way that you still want to send me, again, please feel free to send it to my email. I'm going to mention it's Thom, Thom.Druffel, Druffel at Nashville.gov. It's on my website too, ThomDruffel.com. So feel free to do that. I send out monthly newsletters. So if you want to register or get more information, please feel free to let me know. Next, I wanted to touch base on we wanted to do some events in our district this year. We had some really great ideas, and of course COVID hit and we weren't able to have the events. Then I thought, well, as a kid I used to go looking at Christmas lights, and it always made me feel good and sort of a good feeling in it. And the more I thought of it, it was safe, and we have a chance to sort of, provide that light in a safe way, and maybe have an event that would be interesting. And it sort of, I looked at the last couple of years. I don't know about you, but it seems like the lights in our neighborhoods have gone crazy. All of a sudden, everybody seems to be getting into it. So I thought it would be fun to have a holiday light contest. that would, it'd be different versions. There would be a high-end version, but, sort of a Charlie Brown version, so that we could just have fun. And we're working on that. So I have a couple people involved in doing this, Jenna Armistead in Westmead Park, and Pat Lawson, and Sarah Ray, who's at Belmead Links. They're all association leaders. And so we're going to put together a holiday light contest. And I think it's more than a contest. We started thinking maybe some of the things we could do within that, maybe grow it. But we have a great neighborhood, and we can show it off, and we can have fun. We're going to look at some sponsorship. I asked Ace Hardware, and they've already donated a couple $100 in gift certificates, they said. And it can go to the winners, or it can go to people in need. We want to have registration, so we know all the participants. We'll create maps against that, but we also want to make the registration fee optional, so that if you want to do it without paying, you can. The money will go to a charity. We have to work on that a little bit, but we'll identify a charity that can go to. Again, to make it fun, we're hoping maybe some of the churches will sponsor some hot chocolate stations, so as people go around, they can do it. One of the avenues that we looked at is, can we get seniors that may be more limited of getting out? Can we safely get them out in some fashion, whether church buses or some opportunity to make it fun? I think people are going to put up more lights and keep them up later. And the goal is just to make this a fun neighborhood event, so we can walk up and down the street. I know some of us walk the streets, and we do that. We'll have a block contest. So if you want to not only do it for your house, and you want to do it in a block, we'll do something like that. So we're putting that all together. The details will come out, if not right before Thanksgiving, right after Thanksgiving. And if you have any ideas or thoughts, we are open to do this and just make it a fun event where we can sort of just enjoy what we're doing there. Any questions on that, or any suggestions? Again, always feel free to make any suggestions or do anything along the way. Next, I wanted to touch base on most of you know property tax increase, and that was frustrating. I think most of you know I didn't vote for it, but I want to sort of talk about the direction of that. There was a referendum. Of course, the property tax increase was 34%. That went out in your bills, and I think most of you probably have already seen that, due in February, I believe. And so there's a referendum that was supported to have a maximum of a 2% tax increase. That a judge voted that down, and then I believe it's on appeal. What I took from that is like some of you or many of you is we're sort of at that point where, yeah, we needed a tax increase, but my perspective is if you look at the reasons of why the tax increase was so high, many of those reasons, or two of the reasons, should go away, at least in some form. So we got a 34% tax rate. And if you look at about 46% of that reason is the sales tax shortfall. Well, the sales taxes are coming in stronger. So if that comes in much stronger by our budget season, which would be May and June, I'm hoping that we can take part of that out. Again, these are my hopes, not sure where we're going to be by that time. The other reason for the tax increase was cash balances. We simply had no money in the bank to pay our bills. I don't know if you know this, but if you go back in August, September, we had to borrow money to make our bill payments. And that's a shame because we spent the last couple of years going through our savings. And so there was nothing left. And so we have to replenish per the state code is at least 5% needed to be in there. And we had zero, we had less than zero. So that is the background to what's going on. Again, the referendum was probably extreme. I was against the referendum as it was written, not the intent. And I'll glad to answer any specific questions when it comes to budget and property taxes, but I put through just a proposition to the rest of the council to remind everybody that 72% of the reason that the property tax were increased may go away. There's nothing there. It doesn't say anything except to remind them many people are suffering because of the tax increase. And if there's a way to get away from some of that increase next year, we need to be highly aware of that. So I'll be watching that. The other thing I'm working on is something that's not really exciting for most, and that's a debt policy revision. And what that means simply is, if you look at amount of debt per our operating capital, it's gone up from 8 to 10% to 14% of the operating budget. And now we'll be up to 15 to 16% soon. It's like having a credit card that we just aren't ever going to stop or have a limit. And so I'm working right now on some ideas to cap that, or at least create a higher degree of awareness. It's sort of a dangerous time to necessarily cap it, but we have to do more to create more accountability within our government to ensure that our debt doesn't continue to drive what's going on. So that's, I think all of you, or many of you, are concerned about the property tax as well as I am. I just wanted to give you an update on what at least I'm doing about it. Are there any specific questions?
Can you hear me?
I just heard you now. Yeah, I hear you. Okay.
Yeah, hi. What is an update on the possibility of the state taking over our finances?
That's unlikely, since the 34% increase went through. And secondly, it looks like that the referendum did not go through. So if the referendum would have gone through, you can only imagine the impact on metro government. Again, I'm not a big advocate for this property tax increase, but halfway through the year, we would try to come up with $300 million in cost savings in 6 months. Probably almost impossible without making draconian cuts in places that you really don't want to, in terms of police and fire and areas like that. Again, intentionally, I understand, but it wasn't going to be the right thing to do with that number. I mean, I think Councilman Glover, who's one of our strongest conservatives, financially could only come up with a 22% tax increase. And that was still with significant cuts in services. So a 2% increase would have been pretty rough to deal. So that, having said all that, the answer to your question is the controller at this point in time, I think, is going to leave us alone because we've sort of followed through with all his concerns, which is primarily is having enough money in the bank to pay our bills. And that 34% increase, again, replenishes our cash balances and our savings accounts. That allows us some flexibility in paying our bills. And also, revenue must equal expenses. That means non-reoccurring revenue, your taxes must equal non-reoccurring expenses, which is, of course, metro government operational costs. Those two things were going to be checked off. And so as we go through right now, it's unlikely the state controller will be involved. Does that answer your question okay?
Yeah, that's fine. May I ask a question? about the previous subject, the homeless
Yeah,
now?
you sure can.
Got there a minute late. Okay. Has anyone ever looked into, in some way, forcing the owner of the shopping centers or Lowe's or any of the heavy hitters that own property there, commercial property there, to handle the problem either legally as a public nuisance, or since we are the ones that provide the business for these stores to stay in business, has anyone ever legally challenged the owner of the properties where these homeless hang out?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to the question. I do know when I started, first of all, that's not my district, so it's very difficult actually to jump into this. I don't want to say that. I mean, I think Councilman Rosenberg's probably worked hard at it. And it's just a matter of, you got some of that land's owned by the state, some by the city, and some by Lowe's. And then you got a very socially sensitive issue. So you got a lot of things working where, I think it's easy to ignore it because the solutions and answers are complex and expensive. And so my goal is, to really work to solve it, not just keep ignoring it and pass it down the line, because that's sort of what's been done for 10 years. I think if we would have done this 10 years ago when there was just a few people over there homeless, we might have had a better chance to make it easier and solve it. But now we're sort of with, I think there's estimated to be 125 to 225, if I have that right, but those numbers are changing. So it becomes more complicated. And then, Ms. Tackett told me the longer homeless stay out of the social network, the more difficult it is to bring them out of that situation. So anyhow, I don't know. I will. I'm working on several fronts that I really don't want to touch base yet on. But Ms. Tack and I are talking to it weekly, trying to find ideas. And in my case, I'm on Budget Finance Committee this year, and I've been this last year. And I can assure you, I've asked her for a path to solving this. Hopefully within our 34% property tax increase or less. Because again, if we ignore it and just say, well, we're not going to solve it, it won't go away. I mean, the city is in a position where it's going to say, we're just going to, take everybody out of there. It doesn't work that way, because they'll just come out of the places they were put in and go back to where they were, and enforcement is very difficult. So I'm talking about around it a little. Helps. Does that answer part of your question?
Yeah, it certainly does. May I ask one last one now?
Oh, sure can.
About that. If you go on next door in Westmead, where I live, there seems to be a hesitancy amongst the people that live here to call 911. They seem to feel more comfortable or polite or something, and they dial 311. And I read people, there could be an armed person on their driveway at 2 a.m, and they call 311.
Yeah.
In general, I feel that 911 should be called, but I guess other people don't agree with that. What is your opinion on what we should do if somebody is on my property, whether it's homeless people or not?
Yeah, I think Sergeant Rucker would acknowledge that the more you can identify issues that are potentially crime related in our neighborhood, the better we get patrols against those issues. So, I went to one of their meetings about 3 or 4 months ago, and Commander Corman said, here's the problem. I see tons of comments on Facebook about issues with people in the neighborhood and homeless. And he said, we got 2 calls in like 6 months. And what happens is people are sensitive to their plight. And I get it, because, they're people that have tough times. The problem is they can't measure it if they don't get calls. So they see all the social media comments and people concerned, but until there's hard numbers that they get call-ins, and if you look at their statistic reports, those statistics don't bear out the level of concerns that people are
I couldn't agree with you more, Thom. Couldn't agree with you more.
So it's really just getting everybody, if it's a crime or if there's a serious concern, to make sure we call them. It's not like, Commander said, I want a lot of calls, but he said, that's how we measure the issue. And so if you were to look from a distance, if you were to look at, at stats by precincts, our stats don't look like there's much going on. So it's really important that and I try to remind everybody at every case, let's do what we can to take care of them. But if there is a crime or there's an issue, please report them to the police. We don't want them necessarily to go to jail. And most of the time, if it's a subtle minor thing, they'll just help manage the situation. But we do need to let them know so that they do get incorporated into the stats, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure does. Thank you, Thom.
I have a question here too, and I'll just start taking questions. And it's a good question. It says, can you address why no furloughs of any kind weren't considered by the mayor during the crushing small business in downtown from shutdowns? I didn't know who answered that, Lane's, but I totally agree. So during the budget session, I'm a business guy, and a business guy, you respond to the environment or the economic events. To not have done anything more than we did, for me was not acceptable. So what I did during the budget season was I put in 5 amendments. Still working on a couple follow throughs on things like that, because doesn't sound interesting, but the reality is, we're at another $100 million in debt than we were a couple of years ago. But you go back to the operational budget, I asked for at least a 5% decrease in the operational budget, except for police and fire, because I felt like everybody's making a sacrifice. There should be an opportunity to make an operational sacrifice someplace. And again, I've been doing this for 50 years. I'm sorry, but if you give me a 5% decrease, and there should be some opportunity to cut expenses. It's not pretty, nobody likes it, but it's a reality of what we have in business. You respond to the revenue and the environment. I don't understand why they couldn't do it. I will say that there are certain things within civil service that becomes more difficult to do, but the answer to the question is, I brought that up. I brought it up 2 or 3 times. It is the mayor's decision to do that. And there's probably 6 to 8 of us that harp. If you look at if you were to go back on the recordings at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, our budget, you could hear myself and several of us asking the question, why can't we cut costs? So I totally agree, but there's not enough of us pushing that dime right now to make a difference. Like I mentioned earlier, the good portion of that property tax increase, just so you know, the property tax increase is not necessarily called sunset, but it is redetermined every year. So if they're not going to cut costs, then we need to take a look at, do we need all of that revenue property tax increase for this next year with that 34%? In my mind, and everything I'm seeing with the sales tax coming in at higher, et cetera, I can't say unequivocally what's going to happen in the spring, but if all this stuff happens in a positive way, there should be an opportunity to back off some of a property tax increase. I hope that answers your question. This next question is similar to that. It says, no one likes to cut costs, but it does give an opportunity to look at how things are done and re-engineer them to do things differently. So one of my amendments to answer to that is I called zero-based budget. I put in an amendment that required a zero-based budget. We didn't get passed, which would have required, in our business, I used to manage lots of hotels. So I'd go into a hotel and say, you fight for every piece of, expense and cost that you need, because things get fat after a while. And so I put that in. It didn't get approved, but I did get through to the point where Director of Finance Crumbo, I think, is making some inroads in trying to identify metrics to determine how productive and efficient our city is. And I think I'm pushing that a little bit more. I just talked to them again today. They are working on some financial controls to ensure we are doing the right stuff. And in re-engineering, I asked that we benchmark against some of these other cities to identify what is their public works per house or per person. That's one of the best ways we can go is start benchmarking some of the other cities. And I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm pushing that dime a little bit more too, because when we get a budget, $2.4 billion, I got to tell you, it was my first year on budget committee, but I've been through a lot of large budgets. You just don't get a lot of information, to be honest with you. I mean, you got 15 minutes to look at $800 million. And you look at it and go, you can ask a lot of questions, but the reality is the process is in my mind, needs to be much stronger. So we need, number one is we need metrics. We need to compare and benchmark against other cities and counties to identify, are we effective? I think we have a lot of good people. I would say that people I talked to, worked with in Metro are really good people. I think they mean the best, but that doesn't mean that we're effective. And I think that's some area that I continue to work on. Again, Director of Finance Crumbo is working on some metrics and trying to figure out ways that he can re-engineer and reorganize their departments. We had a great conversation. I got to sit in on one of their meetings, and they're pretty serious about doing it. So it is a good question, and it is something we're working on. And I hope if I'm not answering the question, holler at me, because I'll talk through it. But if I'm not hitting on the head, I'm glad to talk farther. Next is what's being done more to government accountability and spending to curb our growing debt. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. We have a debt policy, but it doesn't really benchmark the growing debt. And I think, the mayor, if you go back to David Fox, even 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, the alarm bells were going off and nobody really wanted to listen because we were a city that was growing. And so, we're hitting 15%, 15% of debt. 10 years ago it was 8%. And I don't think it sounds like we're paying attention. It's just easier to spend money and not for capital projects and different projects without looking at the overall impact on our operating budget. But it's taken another 100, in the last few years, it's gone from a couple $100 million to $300 million as our operating budget. Well, that number could be used to solve the homeless and other things. And nobody, I don't know if it's forced our priority level. If you have unlimited spending, and I'm not saying we've done that, but we haven't looked at how far can we go. It doesn't force your priorities. I'll just say one, for example. Yeah, getting some feedback. So if you're not, if you can mute, if you're not on, we built 2 ice hockey rinks, one in Antioch and one in Bellevue. Beautiful, great places. The taxpayers we pay off those rinks. Beautiful places, great place for our people, but was that combined, $40 to $50 million more important than some of the schools that we have that are run down? I don't know. I mean, the reality is, if you have uncapped capital, or at least perceived capital, you spend it at will and not prioritizing it to the most important things that should be spent on in terms of capital spending. So I don't know if those discussions have been made, and I just I have a bill that I introduced last, and it was passed on first reading to really look at our debt policy. I'm going to defer it probably to January because there's some information that's going to be coming out that I need more background on from the mayor's office. But to answer that question, we have not done a good job of watching out or pay attention to our spending and prioritizing it, in my opinion. Why is the county considering the utilities from out of county when estimated cost increase of $300,000? I think you're talking about. Hopefully, you're talking about the solar energy piece. And correct me if I'm wrong. There's some solar energy work, and I understand there's going to be a grant that helps to pay for some of that, and there's a payback. So if you email me, I'll get you more specific answers if I'm answering the question correctly. What is the status of the insurance council keeping it? If you only want to answer, I voted so. Background to this is Metro Council members get if you're elected for 2 terms, you get the Metro insurance for lifetime. Now you don't get, it's not all paid for. Like I don't use it because I'm on Medicare, but the reality is if you use it, you still pay for a third of your insurance, just like most private insurance situations. What this allows is after 2 terms, you're allowed to be involved in the Metro Council life insurance for forever. What that does is put Metro on for 2/3 of that cost, and for the Metro former Metro Council person on for 1/3. That was brought up. It was voted to defer that till March. I voted against deferring it, and I voted for eliminating that benefit. I just don't. My personal feeling is, in a situation like we have today, where we're having to ask people to make sacrifices, we should be the first to make that sacrifice. It just makes no sense to me that we aren't making this sacrifice. So, just so you know, that's my personal perception. It actually doesn't affect me, personally, but I don't believe it's the right thing to have at a time when that everybody is out of business, losing jobs. And I will tell you, it's not much money, actually, when you look at it, because, a fair amount of the people that are getting Medicare, so it's not like it's effectiveness. I think the total cost was, $800,000. So out of a large budget, it's not a lot, but in principle, in my opinion, we didn't need to do it. So I voted to eliminate it. Hope that answers your question. If I don't, let me know, but it's my feeling when it comes back in March, I'll continue to vote to eliminate that as a long-term benefit. Can we, the last,
Thom,
yeah.
May I answer? That what you had just said is, from what I understand, not really 100% of the answer to it. If you're a Medicare patient, like I am, it pays for Part A and 80% of that. So that if you do have private insurance, that can be used for the 20% that Medicare doesn't cover.
Okay.
And it can be used for the doctor's bills, and it can be used for the prescription Part D. I'm a Medicare patient, and I still pay because I don't have any private. I own my own business, so I had no secondary insurance. So I pay about $8,000 a year as a Medicare patient to give my wife and I coverage for the 20%, the prescription, and the doctor's bills. So even though you're a Medicare patient, you may have other insurance that covers that 20%, and you don't need this. but many of them do use that. So we would save a lot more if it was totally removed. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And that it wouldn't change the purpose of why I would vote. I still don't think it's the right.
Good.
But I'm glad for that, because I actually have not used my Medicare yet. I'm on my private insurance at the hotel for a couple more months before I retire. And but that wouldn't change my perspective, but I appreciate that comment. Another comment here is, can the city do more to curb COVID infections and deaths? I have not covered this. I'm torn on this because for everybody that believes we got to all stay at home, there's others that believe there's bigger issues if we stay at home. I know from the council's perspective, there's multiple opinions, but I have to say it's the mayor and the director of health, and they really don't ask our opinion. You know, I had COVID, so I know I had it October 1st, and I'd have to say I've had the flu, I've had everything in the world ever since I was a kid. I had all these things, but COVID, you know, I had a mild case, but I think my takeaway is it's scary because the more I read about it, even a week after, and I was getting better, they said it can come back in some fashion, and then it does carry with you another couple, at least for me, a couple more weeks where you're tired, you don't recognize because you don't do much, and then you can have post-COVID headaches, which I did. So there's some really residual issues that to me are a little bit scarier than any other flu. But having said that, you know, should the schools go back? I don't know. I mean, it's a tough decision. The science from what I'm starting to read is let the kids go back to school. I think that's from Atlanta, and so my daughter is a first grade teacher, so I do worry about her. But you know, the safety that they have is also pretty good. I don't have an answer. I don't know as a city I have to trust that they're making wise decisions. But again, we're sort of advised as to what the decisions are made, not really getting input. So I'm not sure that helps. But you know, I having had it is for being older, and I have some family that have it. It's a little on the scarier side than most. And so probably doesn't answer your question, but that's sort of what I have. Any other questions or anything I can do? I really appreciate you guys spending the time. I hope to do this every 2 or 3 months and making it meaningful. So if you have questions down the road, I'd be willing to, you know, hit those. I have no, I mean, I don't know if you all know me very well, but I have no long-term aspiration to be anything political. So my only job is, you know, what can we do best for our district, for our neighborhoods, and best for the city. Last thing I'm working as chair of the education committee, I'm working on some coordination with the mayor's office and the school board. We're starting to meet on a monthly basis, which has never happened before. So at least when the budget comes and we have a $940 million budget, we understand the programs that are requested and the foundation rather than sort of just jamming a budget through. But I'll be glad to have any discussion and respond, whether in an email or on the next one, which will probably be in January. So any other questions I can help you with? Okay.
Does non-aspirations mean you're never going to run for mayor?
Absolutely not.
Oh, come on.
I got to tell you, my long story. I wasn't running for this job.
I know, but
5 years ago,
I hope you'll consider it.
5 years ago, someone talked me into saying, maybe this is the second time I ran, of course. And quick story. So someone that's a big political guy. He said, you do this stuff. Why don't you run? Ask some friends. I did. Then I go, great idea, Druffel. And I got to find the right answer. Long story. I asked my wife and I said, well, this is stupid. She goes, no, not really. Why don't you do it? You probably do okay. So that was November. I'm in the hotel business. Butch Spearden he has a Christmas party for our hospitality. He's the president of CBC, and so he was talking and talked to our CEO of the Hospitality Association, and he goes in front of 200 hospitality people. He says, "I hear Mr. Druffel, one of our friends, is going to run for Metro Council," and I go, "Where did he get that stuff?" I said, "I was considering." I walked out, and as all, I had a fair amount of friends and owners and stuff, and they started giving me checks. Now I couldn't take checks because I wasn't officially running. And I go, oh man, I'm in trouble. And so that's how it started, to be honest with you. I mean, I really was, I was 50-50 whether I was going to do it, but I think that put me over the 50-50. And so that's how I got into it. It really wasn't, at 68, almost 69, it sure wasn't a burning aspiration. But hopefully I will have some common sense solutions and can make sure our community stays as nice as it is. And that's really my hope. Any other questions or anything I can help you with? Individually, if you see something, ask something, please let me know. I take this seriously. I'm not in this job just to I can't say look pretty because I'm not pretty, but there's nothing I can do. I'm really here for you. So I just want to do the best I can while I'm here. And someone asked me if I'm still married, and yeah, don't do this if you want to stay married. I'm happily married to a great wife, but yeah, it does cause some tensions, that's for sure. If not, have a great Thanksgiving, and I really, I love our neighborhood.
You too, Thom.
Please let me know if anything way, and if not, I'll talk to you in January, but y'all take care of yourself.
Yeah, take care. Keep up the fight.
Thanks, Thom. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Y'all be good.
You still there?
Yeah, I sure am.
Hey, Thom, it's Mike Nixon.
Yeah, hey, Mike.
How are you?
Good.
I'm not sure who else is still on there. I just wanted just to throw something in on the homeless situation over there.
Sure.
If you need some help, I don't know very much about it, but it's something I wouldn't mind helping with down the road, or help some way or other. And also on the traffic calming situation, I had sent several things in, as I'm sure several people in the neighborhood have. They finally came out and put one of the speedometers out on Wilsonia, and they put it up at the far end, about 100 feet from the stop sign, and left it there 3 days, and it was gone. So I'm going to contact them about that. But I just wanted you to know that they finally, after a year, did send something out. I don't know what what their thoughts were as to what information they got, but other
Mike,
people I know have sent many things in about the traffic calming, and I just wanted to let them know that at some point in time they will come.
Hey, Mike, do this for me. Send me an email with that exact confirmation. Derek Haggerty runs the traffic calming. And so two parts of this. Number one is, yeah, I mean, if they put it in the wrong place, what they do is measure the speed based on the speed limit relative to everybody else's. They probably got 150 requests, and they look at, what are the worst case scenarios and who has the worst. And so we want to put ours in the best perspective. So send me a note, and I'll make sure they come out and measure it again. But two, recognize that part of the problem was when this referendum occurred, and they were thinking they were going to have to go to a 2% property tax hike versus 34%. That would have actually eliminated departments such as traffic calming. No,
I totally understand that.
The
catch-22 year of all time.
Well, what happened? The city had to anticipate it, Mike. So about a month ago, Kevin Crumble, the mayor, said, "You start cutting costs now, because we'll never be able to catch up even with that 2%." So what happened is and they still are on the edge, but they started actually cutting costs about a month to 6 weeks ago with serious cuts, which affects things like traffic calming. So what happened then is they just simply, again, a lot of people their hours were cut, and projects like this that may have more opportunity got cut back.
No, I fully understand. I'd rather have my trash picked up.
I know. So if you email that to me, Mike, and I know Derek.
No worries.
And I'll be glad to send them a note.
Yeah, thank
Tom,
you.
I wanted to
Tom.
Tom,
I appreciate
tell you,
it.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Tom, are you still on?
Yeah, I sure am.
Yeah, this is Steve Morris again.
Hey, Steve.
I just wanted to tell everybody and thank you personally. I'm a member of the Jewish synagogue, the Chabad in Bellevue, and or sort of. And I want everyone to know that we had a major traffic problem with 3 accidents, hit and run. Thankfully, none of the children in our school were injured over the last year and a half, 2 years, and you funneled it to the right person and in this traffic controlling department, and we were able to get blinking red lights and stop signs, whatever. They put in a bunch of stuff, and so far we haven't had an accident, but it was really dangerous, and people should know that you handled it, or you coordinated the effort to handle it, even though it wasn't your own district, and I want to personally thank you for it, and so does the rabbi. Thank you.
You send a note, sometimes they listen, sometimes you have to tell them 2 or 3 times, but I think if you're a squeaky wheel, and Steve, thanks for your notes and comments. I appreciate it. That was very nice.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Again, I'm here as long as you want me. Otherwise, I'm going to go grab some dinner.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tom.
Y'all take care. Have a good Thanksgiving, okay?
Bye-bye. Thank you.
What happened? The rabbi.